It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg over his purchase of a huge property on the island of Kauai. Zuckerberg is locked in a legal battle over land that is part of his sprawling estate. Some Hawaiians say they have a legal and moral claim to that land. They trace their ancestry and connection to the place back generations.
The middle class was once a symbol of the American dream. So, what exactly happened to the American middle class?
Tricon is trying to buy 800 houses a month, and there are companies even bigger. Invitation Homes owns more than 80,000 rental houses. American Homes for Rent close to 60,000. Some of the all-stars of finance, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Blackstone, have put hundreds of millions of dollars into these companies.
January, 33% of all homes purchased in the U.S. were bought by investors, often Wall Street-backed companies with multi-billion-dollar funds.
Home prices in the large urban metropolitan areas were so expensive that people started moving out. And then you see these wildfires, and they're not going away.
With high inflation and increased demand, analysts we spoke to say, unfortunately, we can only expect rents to rise even more.
$16.15 trillion. That is how much debt American households owed by the second quarter of 2022. A staggering 41.79% increase from $11.39 trillion just 10 years prior.
Bill Gates owns more land than all of the entire city of New York. Jeff Bezos' land is double the amount, clocking in at 420,000 acres. John Malone, the largest private landowner in America, owns 2.2 million acres all by himself, a landmass slightly smaller than the island of Puerto Rico. America is enormous, yet 100 of the richest and largest private landowners in America own 1.86% of all the land available in the United States, the majority of their land being forests, ranches, and farmland.
You can't buy a house because they already did. Institutional investors, including private equity and Wall Street firms like BlackRock, are buying single-family homes at a steady pace. This really kicked into gear during COVID. SFR Analytics reported that the top 10 institutional buyers held over 430,000 single-family rentals. And these same institutions had purchased 26% of affordable homes across the United States, pricing out first-time home buyers. The Urban Institute reports that they have taken up 25% of single-family rentals in popular areas like Atlanta. and rent has skyrocketed there as a result. They're simply not playing the same game as us. These cash-rich businesses outbid Americans by $3 trillion due to low loan rates from the Fed's 2020-2021 quantitative easing. So they got lower rates for borrowing money while average buyers face rising rates and rising prices. Your American dream became their rental empire. Your American dream is their profit margin, and it's giving you will own nothing and be happy per the World Economic Forum in their predictions for 2030. And personally, I reject that notion, and I think you should too. There will be only momentary and fleeting reprieve until the Federal Reserve is ended and we nationalize our monetary system. But our current reality is that we are controlled by a non-government foreign entity with no allegiance to our country. So why would they have any incentive for Americans to prosper?
These are the things that are going on in there. It's like an octopus with arms. It's many, many arms, but you got to go after the head of the octopus in this one. Who is it? The central banks, the IMF, the ECB, the private West central banks, the BIS, the Rothschild banks.
The Federal Reserve really, even though it is not part of the federal government, it is more powerful than the federal government. It's more powerful than the president, the Congress, and the courts.
The problem is that since 1864, we've had a debt-based banking system. All our money is based on government debt. We cannot extinguish government debt without extinguishing our money supply. That's why talk of paying off the national debt without reforming our banking system is an impossibility. That's why the solution does not lie in discussing the size of the national debt, rather it lies in reforming our banking system. There's nothing federal about the Federal Reserve, and there are no reserves. The name is a deception created back before the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913 to make Americans think that America's central bank operates in the public interest. Why can't Congress do something about the Fed? Most members of Congress just don't understand the system, and the few who do are afraid to speak up.
As difficult as it was for me, I have come to an inescapable and profoundly disturbing conclusion. I believe that an elite group of people and the corporations they run have gained control over not just our energy, food supply, education, and health care, but over virtually every aspect of our lives. And they do it by controlling the world of finance, not by creating more value, but by actually controlling the source of money. When I followed the money, I found that it took me up the levels of a pyramid. Here we are at the bottom level going about our daily lives. Above us is government, people who are given a monopoly on force and use it to tax and control us whether or not we agree. But who controls them? At the next level are the corporations. Many would say that it is now corporations and not nation states that rule the world. They call it a corporatocracy. To acquire the world's resources and control the markets, this corporatocracy must have access to cheap money. The big corporations get their loans at special rates from the big banks, which means that those who control the major banks, the moneyed elite, ultimately control the corporations. As I've followed the money, I've learned that almost everything I once believed about money is simply not true.
The problem is we have a privately owned central bank system in the United States disguised as a government-owned system. Now, if you look in the telephone book here in the Washington, D.C. area, you look up for Federal Reserve in the blue government pages, it's not there. It's in the white pages right next to Federal Express. It's a privately owned central bank.
Runaway inflation, hundreds of thousands of jobs lost, and a sharp increase in the cost of living have brought thousands of South Africans onto the streets.
In recent decades, Ireland has become one of the most expensive countries in Europe. Recent increases in fuel, food, rent and energy has left many workers with little disposable income. On Saturday, people took to the streets in Dublin to express their anger, including pensioners who are really feeling the squeeze.
We have a levy on our pensions to make up for the money that was stolen out of our pensions by the government. What is happening now is we're suffering state-sponsored elder financial abuse.
All professions are affected by the rising cost of living.
Protesters throw rocks and sticks at police, authorities shooting tear gas into crowds as they march towards the Legislative Palace in Lima. The growing tension as President Pedro Castillo imposed a curfew Tuesday to quell recent anti-government protests over rising gas and food prices.
What I'm going to try and do is just give you some charts and a couple of tables just to paint a little bit of a picture that you already know. Okay, so what this presentation is fundamentally designed to say is this. Africa historically, sub-Saharan Africa, has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay, but this is the opposition that they're fighting. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay? And that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight. Okay, so this is what it's fundamentally about.
We work many different ways, but perhaps the most common is that we will identify a third world country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters. However, the money never goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our own corporations to build infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, highways, industrial parks, things that benefit a few rich people in that country, as well as our own corporations, but do not help the majority of the people at all. And yet the whole country, is left holding a huge debt. And it's such a huge debt they can't possibly repay it. So at some point, the economic hitmen go back and say, you owe us a lot of money, you can't repay your debts, so give us a pound of flesh. When I failed to bring them around, to get them to accept these loans, to get them to put their countries into servitude, then I knew that standing right behind me were what we call the jackals. And these are people who overthrow governments or assassinate their leaders. And both Jaime Roldos of Ecuador and Omar Torrijos of Panama were assassinated by CIA-sponsored jackals because I failed to corrupt them.